The Russian submarine of the end of the world appears again. A huge nuclear submarine poses a real threat in the ocean. You have no idea what is floating beneath you, and yet it carries a thermonuclear weapon that can destroy an entire continent. To know more about this sighting, stay in our video. Welcome to Top USA Entertainment. Silent and inconspicuous, it can lie on the bottom of the sea for a whole year, waiting for the order to attack. You'd think such a lethal weapon would be banned, but recent events suggest otherwise. Not long ago, a Russian submarine from the end of the world was spotted in the Arctic. It surfaced in the middle of the ice, stayed in that position for several hours, and then dived again. The interesting thing is that Putin himself has not been seen on television for quite some time, and what better place to hide than in an eternally frozen wasteland, armed with nuclear missiles? I think you get the idea. But what is this doomsday vehicle? The nuclear submarine K-329 Belgorod, originally part of the anti-project, was supposed to be quite standard in its construction. Its closest counterpart was a submarine called Kursk, which sank in the Barents Sea in 2000. I don't know if it was the Kursk disaster or some other factor that affected the engineers, but the Belgorod was heavily modified. An additional 30-meter compartment was cut in its center section, where the missiles had previously been located. The total length of nuclear-powered submarines is more than 180 meters, a new record. To give you a better idea of its size, take a 9-story building, lay it on its side, and do it 6 times in a row from end to end. That's how huge this thing is. As a result, the 180-meter Belgorod is the longest submarine in the world, 10 meters longer than the Ohio class of the United States, which are currently considered the most powerful submarines in the world. However, could the Kursks compete with them? Actually, it is quite likely, because the Russian ship was not made longer to set a record, but to accommodate the world's first stealthy torpedoes armed with nuclear weapons, as well as equipment for intelligence gathering. Moreover, thermonuclear torpedoes are not just inside the submarine, they also float freely on the bottom of the seas in the oceans, waiting for an order. Underneath the submarine, there is a special compartment through which repair drones can be launched to service these torpedoes. Some experts insist that these Poseidon torpedoes are capable of traveling hundreds of kilometers underwater and triggering nuclear tsunamis. Both US and Russian officials have reported that the torpedoes could launch warheads weighing several megatons, triggering radioactive waves that would leave long stretches of coastline uninhabitable for decades. That seems entirely possible for a 20-meter underwater rocket weighing 100 tons. The thought of such a terrifying weapon in the hands of a person who is not the brightest certainly increases the danger factor. By the way, it is quite possible that the appearance of the Kursk in the Arctic is just an attempt to attract the attention of the US military to the submarines that accompanied it, which were seen on the route from St. Petersburg to Antarctica. His path crossed Estonia, Sweden, and Denmark. Occasionally, an object would appear on radar, only to quickly disappear, so these flashes were attributed to a software bug. However, in the territory between Norway and the United Kingdom, 2 large silhouettes will be clearly visible below the surface. The British Royal Navy immediately moved to inspect the objects and discovered the Russian submarines Severodvinsk and Dnieper, which emerged as if nothing had happened. Of course, the UK was not amused, and its army quickly intercepted the submarines and returned them to Russia. These actions caused quite a stir in the US government, who then began tracking the submarines and sent drones to keep an eye on them. As a result, drones discovered the location of the Doomsday submarine, which hovered on the surface of the Arctic, while a Russian ship resupplied it with food. NATO was so disturbed by this discovery that they immediately sent naval forces to the edge of Russia's territorial waters. Only the American part of the fleet consists of 23 ships, all of which are in the Black Sea. A pretty serious mess, and all caused by just 2 submarines, or maybe 3. But both the Severodvinsk and the Dnieper are nuclear submarines armed to the teeth. Among its arsenal of weapons are powerful torpedoes capable of destroying underwater targets and maneuverable cruise missiles for enemies on the surface. In previous years, the two nuclear submarines had sailed on the surface along the entire coast of Norway, probably because the ships were not ready for combat. But now, the British Royal Navy has confirmed these submarines were submerged underwater and resurfaced later, indicating that both submarines are fully operational. Both submarines have nuclear reactors, which allow them to stay underwater for more than 3 months straight. Although this claim seems dubious, given that the submarines emerged ahead of schedule, directly at the Norwegian Navy's firing range. There are two possible reasons for this. Either Severodvinsk and Vapor are actually not up to their supposed capabilities, or emerged as another act of provocation. If the second option is correct, then it worked, because this exhibition caused the United States to send 24 of its best ships to Russia's neighboring waters. Upon learning of this, the Kremlin sounded the alarm because at least 23 battleships were aggressively approaching more and more. Today, it is known that the NATO ships that entered the Black Sea were American missile destroyers, such as the U.S. Ross. This is a huge steel monster of 150 meters, stuffed with a bunch of advanced weaponry. It carries at least 2 launchers with a total ammunition capacity of 100 guided missiles. Each of these projectiles has its own radar and self-guided warhead, which can independently calculate the enemy's position and transmit the data to the rest of the missiles. Thus, each target receives the exact amount of explosives needed to destroy it. In addition to missiles, the U.S. Ross is also armed with a 127mm Mark 45 artillery mount, which leaves a crater on the ground with each shot. Even the most durable bunker crumbles with a few strokes. The ship also has an answer for aerial targets, specifically 225mm autocannons and 4 heavy machine guns, which can leave any aircraft riddled with holes. At the head of this machine gun gang is the world's fastest firing weapon, Felling CIWS. That's right, the same pseudo-laser you've surely heard of. Imagine a single ship that can destroy an entire fleet. It's scary to think about what 23 of them could do. Naturally, instructors like the U.S. Ross are also prepared to eliminate threats from the underground. For this, they have 2 torpedo tubes to help them do so. Russian submarines have reason to fear for their safety. Russia's only aircraft carrier, the Admiral Kuznetsov, is preparing to help its submarine comrades because it is the only ship capable of standing up to the U.S. Navy. Or maybe not anymore? Surprisingly, at this crucial moment, the important ship inexplicably caught fire. Don't be so surprised. Admiral Kuznetsov always seems to have a problem for one reason or another. Sometimes a crane falls on him, sometimes a rocket falls on him, and sometimes he catches fire. Is it possible that all this was an act of sabotage? However, the most we can report with reliable information is that the fire was successfully put out before it caused much damage, but caused a lot of panic and stress. What makes this aircraft carrier stand out? First of all, its size of 300 meters long and 72 meters wide. That's like 3 football fields. This giant is designed to carry 28 bombers and 24 combat helicopters. I think it is perfectly clear that such a fleet of equipment would pose a significant threat to any enemy, especially if the aircraft is armed with the powerful Kinzhal hypersonic missile systems. Unlike many other warships of its class, Admiral Kuznetsov is actually capable of defending itself. For example, these Kinzhal missiles. This projectile is capable of reaching speeds of 400 meters a second and flying up to 12 miles in the sky, launching deadly blows at key enemy positions. While Admiral Kuznetsov and his hypersonic Kinzhal are scary, they stand no chance against nuclear submarines, the oldest of which could yet destroy this engineering miracle. For example, the submarine K-19 could certainly fight Admiral Kuznetsov. This was Russia's first nuclear ballistic missile submarine, as well as a response to the U.S. Nautilus. However, its production and testing were accelerated to the point that even its captain did not believe it was fit for combat. However, It was completed, and over time, it became a nuclear time bomb. Here's why. In the spring of 1961, the Soviet K-19 was conducting exercises in the North Atlantic. However, in the middle of a maneuver, it had a malfunction when a tube of coolant burst. The situation was unimaginably dangerous. At the time of the incident, the K-19 was operating near a NATO base in the Atlantic, and the explosion, while accidental, could have led the United States and its allies to believe that the Soviet Union was trying to start a full-scale nuclear war. Upon learning of the leak, Captain Nikolai Zaitiev immediately called for volunteers to go to the reactor compartment and fix the leak without sufficient equipment to protect himself. The whole team knew that whoever volunteered would never return. However, 21 brave men immediately volunteered. Fortunately, the temporary cooling system installed by the team worked well enough for another Russian submarine, the S-270, to appear at the last minute and evacuate the crew. The submarine K-19 was towed back to base. However, the engineering team received significant doses of radiation through poisonous gas and steam while installing the makeshift device. Although a complete disaster was averted, it cost the lives of volunteers for the next 2 years, and although the submarine was back in service, a few months after the incident, it experienced failures wherever it went. In 1969, it collided with the American submarine Gato, and 3 years later, a fire on board caused 32 victims. With that, our video comes to an end. Thank you for seeing to the end. We would be tremendously grateful if you subscribed to the channel and left a comment below the video. Remember, this was Top USA Entertainment. I wish you an excellent day. Until next time, friends.